Welcome back to the Naval News. I hope you're having a great week. We have some additional details on the AUKUS timeline, what has happened already and is planned to happen going over the next 2 decades. I thought I'd throw up the timeline here for you so we could go over these year by year and see what is going on. Let's start with last year, 2022. Australia had reopened a naval base they'd closed back in the 1990s called HMAS Encounter down there in South Australia. This is primarily an administrative support base. That supports Navy personnel that work at the Osborne Naval Shipyard, but also other facilities in that region. So that's been reopened to assist with the AUKUS program as well. And if we go into individual crew trainings, we know that the Australian sailors have already been attending the U.S. Navy's Nuclear Power Training Command and are going through that pipeline right now. We're going to begin seeing those graduates this year. This is in parallel with their sailors going underway on our Virginia class, because not every sailor on board a nuclear-powered submarine goes through power school. Some don't need that specific training, but they do need to become familiar with the systems. So that orientation training is happening with Australian sailors underway right now on American Virginia-class submarines. So that's going to continue on through this decade and the 2030s as well. Something else that's due this year is a $1 billion payment from Australia to the United States to fund increased production of submarines. Now, this money can be spent in a number of different ways. They could build a whole new slipway with an assembly building, so there is more parallel construction going on at the same time, but I believe that would greatly exceed a $1 billion payment. Something else the money could be used for would be to build a new submarine tender ship and then station that ship in Australia. Or something in between, like maybe open up some closed submarine maintenance facilities here in the United States so that we can get our submarines that are already built back in the water and back in action faster. That would be some other options that they could use this money for. And something that's going on right now, not only are the Australian sailors coming to the United States for training and experience, so are a lot of the Australian workforces. It's measured to be in the hundreds of employees right now of Australian shipyard workers working in American shipyards this year to get experience building these Virginia-class submarines and the systems that are inside, and then also maintaining, troubleshooting, repair all those systems as well. All that's happening right now. Something that was in the news recently, you might have heard about this, is we plan on selling Tomahawk missiles to the Australians, but we're not allowed to make any kind of sale like that without the approval of Congress. So Congress has been informed that the U.S. military wants to sell over 200 Tomahawk conventional cruise missiles to Australia, probably to be put on the Virginia-class submarines that they're going to be using in the future. So we'll keep an ear to the ground and see what comes of this. We expect it to be approved if it hasn't been approved already by the time you watch this. Now, let's skip ahead a little bit to 2027. This is when the Submarine Rotational Force West, or SRFW, will be formed, and their first submarine is going to be one Astute-class submarine from the UK. And it's not going to be the same submarine that stays in Australia at HMAS Stirling Naval Base. They're going to have a rotation where when Astute comes, they stay for a fixed period of time, and then they rotate back to the UK for their routine maintenance and dry dock periods and operations on that side of the globe as well. And they're just going to keep a constant rotation. When all the Astutes are built, there will be 7 total, and so they'll be able to have a lot of flexibility in going in and out of maintenance and staying operational, as well as keeping one permanently, at least one in Australia at that time. Something that was new to me is that we also intend on stationing, probably on a rotational basis, 4 Virginia-class submarines. This is not part of the Virginia-class that are going to be operated by the Australians. These are American-crewed submarines that are going to increase their visits to Australia, and 4 will be assigned to the Submarine Rotational Force West. Now, this hasn't happened yet. It's 4 years down the road. Things may change, but that's the plan right now, as I understand it. So, in 2030, Australia will begin to take delivery of 3 Virginia classes, possibly 5, but we know of 3 for sure. And what is new is that these will not be new submarines. They're going to be getting older, block probably 4, maybe even Block 3 submarines that they're going to slowly increase their Australian sailors on and moving American sailors off as they integrate the crews from America to Australia, and then eventually do a change of command ceremony where it becomes formally part of the Royal Australian Navy. That's going to happen on 3 Virginias between 2030 and 2033. After they get 3, they have the option to do it to 2 additional ones should they choose to. A big thing with this is they will not need these Virginias very long, so they won't need to worry about refueling them or anything like that. These Virginia class can run for decades without going through a refuel process. So before the fuel runs out on these, they're already going to be getting the new SSN August submarine from the UK. And here is a artist rendering of what that submarine could look like. Credit here to NavyOutlook.com for publishing this. This looks very similar to something a friend of the show, H.I. Sutton, drew a little while ago. I'm not sure this is his drawing, but it looks a little bit like it. And it's basically, a UK version of a Virginia. It's got the Virginia payload module that I'm sure they'll call the AUKUS payload module, or they'll give it a different name, but it looks like the same design. X rudders with the shrouded pump jet on the back for efficiency. It just makes sense. So now the final design may not look exactly like this. This is just to give you an idea, but we do know a few numbers. The 125 meter length number is probably correct. And the width, because it's using the same power plant as the Dreadnought, is probably going to be the same diameter as the Dreadnought, which is 12.8 meters, approximately 42 feet for us Americans here. So looking really good. Now, this design is based on the SSN-R, or SSN replacement, that began all the way back in 2018. So the design of this submarine is already, 4 or 5 years old, and so there's a lot of work already done on it. They're not starting from scratch. So that's, giving them sort of a jump start. If you consider the AUKUS agreement starting as of this year, they've actually been working on this design for a long time. So that's great. Great to see what they come up with. All right. And then finally, we want to just take a step back and take a look at the theater itself. And here I've just focused on the U.S. naval forces. This is where we have either a naval, deep water harbor, or we have permanent duty station, people like in Guam and Japan. And Diego Garcia is often not talked about, which is the way we like it, but that's a submarine base down there in the Indian Ocean. And of course, Pearl Harbor, everyone's familiar with that. I did mark the Philippines here in yellow because they are an ally, and we do have a treaty with Philippines. The American treaty with the Philippines is actually a defensive treaty, unlike the one with Taiwan. And the Philippines have recently invited the U.S. Navy to begin doing port visits again. So we're rebuilding that relationship that deteriorated in the 80s and 90s. And so maybe going forward to 2030, 2040, we may begin to see American ships be permanently forward deployed based out of Subic Bay and in that area. And then finally, the Singapore. While the U.S. Navy operates in and out of Singapore all the time, I marked it in yellow here because it's actually, there's a number of harbors there, most of which are run by Singapore themselves, but the Royal Navy runs at least one of those. And but that is a key strategic location because the Straits of Malacca are right there by Singapore. And so with our allies in the AUKUS agreement, being the UK part of the AUKUS, they operate out of Singapore regularly, and they have a license to operate out of one specific harbor where they keep their warships. So very good stuff. This is a very strong defense in depth, wall of steel, if you will, that has our arsenal diversified intentionally, and it's all integrated through communications. So this is a very strong position that we're in now. And I think the AUKUS deal has cemented our ability to push back against China should we need to. And perhaps this is enough for China to look at this type of situation. And we're just looking at the Navy. We're not even looking at Air Force and Army bases on this map, and know that it's just not worth the price. And maybe they'll change course into a more diplomatic or an economically beneficial solution going forward for both China, the United States, and our allies in the region. I think this AUKUS deal has really has solidified our strength in the Western Pacific theater. And China is probably taking pause at this now And we'll see what they do. But going forward between now and 2040, 2045, we're just going to see an increase in strength in this region. And the cost of war against our alliance is just going to go up every year. So hopefully China changes course and seeks other options. All right, let me know what you think, though. Maybe I'm being wildly optimistic. I think this is a great deal for everybody because it will avoid war, potentially. I hope that it does. Let me know if we've, with this AUKUS agreement, avoided a conflict with China. Or maybe changed it. Maybe it's now going to become an economic one instead of a military one, which I would take that. All right, have a great one, everybody. Leave your comments below. Bye.